Today, I'm interviewing Stephen Cravotta. This episode is a bit of a deviation from what I normally do in my show, where I'm interviewing someone, A, who does not live in Southern Oregon, and B, this is my first episode ever that I'm doing via video. Stephen is someone who is really inspiring to me. Stephen has a really down-to-earth YouTube channel where he goes over very easy to follow step-by-step processes on how to build an app, even if you don't know how to write code yourself, and how to take that app and actually market it effectively. This episode was really interesting for me to record because I'm in the midst of building my own apps, mostly inspired by Stephen and a few other YouTube creators who build mobile apps and software as a service products. So I reached out to Stephen and asked him if he would join me on this podcast, and he kindly said yes. I learned a lot from this episode and from Stephen in general. I really hope that you check out his YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did recording it. So, where are you from originally? Let's start there.
So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia.
Cool.
Actually, so I was born in New Hampshire, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was, kind of raised, and then went to California to attend college. I went to Pepperdine out there, lived there for quite some time, and now I'm kind of nomading.
Nice. So actually my dad went to Pepperdine, so a small world there.
Nice.
He liked it. Yeah, though he wasn't on the main campus. That campus is, absolutely gorgeous. I think he was on some sort of remote campus in LA.
Yeah.
How did you get into building apps originally?
Yeah, so pretty young, kind of like going back to my childhood. I don't know. I was always interested in business, right? Because my dad was a sales guy. I'd always saw him working, and as a young lad, I think you always look up to your dad, right? So I always wanted to be in business in some capacity, like whether it be sales or whatever. So I actually was always looking to make money on the side somehow. And then I watched this movie, The Social Network. It's a movie about Mark Zuckerberg and how he built Facebook and how he learned how to code and stuff like that. And after watching that movie, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I have to learn how to do this. So I immediately went home. I think I was 13, 14 years old at the time, and looked up how to build websites. So that kind of started everything off. I started to build websites, and then I started to promote those websites on social media and make ad revenue. And then eventually that kind of naturally led me into wanting to build my own products and promote my own stuff instead of other people's ads. So that's how I got thrown into the world of app development. And yeah, I started from there and started making simple little games.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it. Where did you learn the skill of marketing originally?
Oh, good question. I think I really learned it on social media in the early days, running Twitter accounts. I think when I first started building those websites and started to make money with AdSense, with ad revenue, I had to understand how to use social media and Twitter particularly to send traffic to those websites. So that's kind of how I really learned the skill of getting someone to click on something on the internet, which I think is the most valuable skill in the world.
It really is, because it's kind of the fundamental, everything in business comes down to sales. If you can't sell anything, then you don't have a business at the end of the day. So yeah, it makes sense. What inspired you to start your YouTube channel?
What inspired me to start my YouTube channel? I kept getting asked the same questions. I don't know. I always wanted to build a YouTube video. I think if you look at my channel, you can look back and there's a video that I made when I was pretty young in my apartment. It's terrible, but I don't know. It's always been in the back of my mind. And I think as I've progressed in business, people just have been asking me the same sort of questions. People ask me all the time how to build an app. So kind of out of necessity, right? Now I can just send people to my YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Do you have a kind of a community around you that was already there before the YouTube channel started that posited all of those questions?
Yeah, I have a pretty broad group of entrepreneur friends, right?
Sure.
So we're always chopping up, and then just some of my hometown friends and my friends from college, they're every now and then I'll get a question from someone, and they'll be like, how are you doing what you're doing, or tell me more, right? So yeah, 100%.
That makes sense. Do you have other friends that kind of are doing the same sort of thing as you?
Yes, very few. Very
Yeah.
few of my I know a couple guys like on Twitter and like actually as I started doing YouTube, I've actually met more and more of these people, right? But
Yeah.
yes, I have a very small, tight knit community of app developers out there, and we
Super
all
cool.
kind of like share tips and tricks and hacks with each other. It's
Yeah.
definitely it's a unique industry. I think it's super opaque, right? Like there's so many app developers out there, like small 1 man, 2 man, 3 man teams who are making absolute boatloads of money on the app store because they just know all like the tips and tricks and how to build an app. And I think they just gatekeep all the information from everyone, which is why I kind of started
Totally.
YouTube and kind of like showing people that it's much easier to start than you might think, right? Like I don't know how to
Yeah.
code or do anything. I don't know how to code. Like I haven't coded any of my apps myself, at least my latest ones. So I'm kind of like, I have fun showing people how to do that.
And I think that's what drew me to your YouTube videos is I found them really inspiring because it's like a lot of YouTube videos I find people do this really formulaic, like I'll give you one tiny little sliver of knowledge in this video and then we'll end it there and you'll have to watch my 50 other videos to get like basically what I would say you dropped in like 2 videos. You did, like 50 different crappier account videos. And so I thought that was pretty refreshing, to be honest.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think a lot of
Yeah,
people are like scared to share real value or they don't really have any value to share. But
totally.
at the end of the day too, like I'm not really concerned giving away like all this information because very rarely will someone actually like go to work and actually do the information that I'm talking about. Like I feel like a lot of people will
Totally.
just watch the video and like think about it, but very rarely will people actually like go
Yeah.
and put the advice into practice, which is I
Totally.
don't
And
know.
even if they do it, it's a huge market out there.
Yeah.
Like the app world is, got to be like at least $1 trillion industry. So unlikely that they'll like compete directly in your domain, I would imagine. No, sorry, continue.
No, no, you're good. That was
Okay. What do you think in terms of like criteria when you're thinking about an app that you're thinking of developing? What is usually the criteria you think about that A will make it, something in your mind at least that seems like it has a plausible market, and B is achievable under your, financial and time constraints that you have?
Yeah, I think like the most important thing when you're starting to build an app is approaching it from like a marketing mindset. Like, is this app going to be marketable, right? Because let's just think of it from like square one. Like, even if you have a really terrible product and like the app isn't really that good, but you can still market like millions of people to it, like you're going to make money. And then on the
Yep.
flip side, like if you spent 10 years developing an app and it's absolutely perfect, but no one knows about it, like you don't have a business there. You're never going to make money, right? So that's kind of the way I approach building apps as a marketing mindset first. And that's how I approach building Puff Count, right? I knew vaping was going to
Yeah.
be a problem for a long time. I knew it was going to be super marketable. I knew it was going
Totally.
viral on TikTok and social media. So I knew that regardless, I was going to be able to figure this out, right? Like, and as long as I can market it, I can always improve upon the product, right? Like mobile
Totally.
apps are like fashion. They're never done. You're always improving and building upon your app, right? So that's kind of the way I thought about it. And then to answer the second part of your question, like, is it feasible like monetarily? Yes, because when I launched Puff Count, it was just an MVP. It was the core number one feature that I thought drove the most value for my users, and I just launched that. And it was relatively cheap to start with just that one feature. And then once I
Yeah.
got it out there, and once I started marketing it, and once I started making a little bit money back and get a little bit of money back and getting feedback from my users, then I was able to invest more time, more resources into building features that people were asking me for, right? Like I wasn't just guessing
Totally.
random features to like throw in the app. So you start slow, start from a marketable product, and then I think from there, you can kind of like figure it out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Getting the user feedback as a tool rather than trying to build something that's, finished at day one makes so much more sense, and certainly way more economically. How do you kind of assess what is the core product? Because at least in my mind, a lot of times when I think of app ideas, they start sprawling really fast. Like, oh, but I need, these 5 other features connected to it for it to be a viable product. How do you kind of avoid that and get to the most narrow thing that actually has enough value that it can be marketable?
Yeah, I think that's a trap that a lot of first time app founders fall into. And like, I've definitely fell into it myself. Like, oh, I need to build this, and this before I really launch it. And like, then it'll be perfect. Right. But then
Yeah,
you just fall into this never ending cycle of like throwing money at this and building, and you never go to market. But yeah, I don't know. It really depends on like what your product is. Like, what is the one core feature
sure.
that people are going to be most interested? For me, in puff count, it's tracking your puffs, right? Like
Yeah,
that is the core feature. And I think it's like an exercise that you have to run through, like as a founder yourself. Like, what is that one core thing that's people are super excited about? And I think like you can figure that out in different ways. Like you could ask 10 friends, you could ask 10 random people on social media, like what excites you the
totally.
most about this idea? And then after you ask 10 people, like seven out of 10 of them are probably going to say the same thing. Right. And then you go build that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes definite sense. Do you ever try building, do you ever like venture outside of like typical apps and more into like software as a service or I don't know, websites and things like that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm actually building one right now. It is a
Nice.
B2B SaaS, which has a web portal kind of right for the business side of things, but it also has a mobile app side for the consumers. And
Sweet.
I'll tell you what it is right now. Like, and then I'll kind of tell you why I built it. It's basically a marketplace where brands and creators can connect, right? So like if brands want content done for, their business, they can use this platform and connect with creators, and creators will create the content. But yeah, I think mobile apps are good. Like mobile apps and B2C products are good. They're easy to market and like they're great for like a first time founder. But I think like the real enterprise value and the real like multi-million dollar companies that build like, to billions, they're B2B SaaS products, right?
Yeah,
So I definitely
totally.
want to get into that world a little bit more, because at the end of the day, like if you can solve a problem for a business, businesses are willing to pay you more money than any random consumer would. So
Totally. Yeah. And even if you get like one or two slightly bigger businesses, like that's way bigger than, 100 or 1,000 consumers a lot of times in terms
exactly.
of, yeah, no, that makes sense. How do you assess, especially with like your new SaaS business, the cost structure? Like that's one thing I kind of have been thinking about. Like you can get costs that kind of bubble out of control when it comes to, hosting services and development time and all the different, core products that you kind of have to build into your system in order to, track analytics and all those things. Like, how do you kind of assess what's necessary, what's not, and, how much you need to make in order for this thing to be profitable and all that?
Sorry, you chopped out a little bit there, like the last 5 seconds of the end of
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. Just yeah, like how do you assess kind of the amount of how do you figure out the things that are actually necessary in that product and like the cost structure? Like, I think one of the things I've been thinking about lately is when you're building a SaaS product, there's all of those sort of services that come into play, like, AWS or whatever the
Yeah.
hosting services are that can kind of cause added expense that are variable costs. You see what I'm saying?
Dude, it's a great question. And to be honest with you, I don't have the answer to that because I'm dealing with that a bit myself. But I
Sure.
think like from just like a broader perspective, like is a B2B SaaS the first business that you should be starting as, a first time
Yes.
entrepreneur? Like, no.
Right.
No, I don't
No,
think
that
so, right?
totally
Like
makes sense.
I think it's much easier to start from like a different business model like e-commerce or an agency or like whatever it may be, like, or having a 9 to 5 or like, right? Like having a steady sort of income that you can use to fund the software business. Cause I think like you said, rightfully so, like at the end of the day, like software development costs a lot and the tools like AWS, whatever the tools may be, also cost a lot of money. So
Yeah.
it's not an easy business model to get into, but also I think that's why it's great, right? Because like you build this moat of like technology, right? So like the money that I invest into development, no one like you can't just take that away from me, right? Like you also have to invest that money into development and like you have
Totally.
to build this software to like be able to compete with me. Whereas like any other different business model out there, like e-commerce, like if I'm selling a product from like AliExpress, like anyone on the planet can also sell that product from AliExpress. So like I think
Totally.
that's why software is a great business model because like you do build a moat, but at the same time
Yep.
it does take resources, it does take knowledge, so like it's a little bit harder to get into. But I think the
Totally.
upside is so much
It's
higher.
It's actually funny you say that because I'm right now reading this book called The Seven Powers. And the whole premise of it is like the seven things that great businesses have that differentiate them from the pack and that give them like disproportionate returns that no other business has in that same market. And one of the reasons for that is, like you said, it's a moat. Like it's really hard for another business to take over that market share because for all sorts of different reasons, whatever that business is, it has these intrinsic properties in it that make it really, expensive for a competitor to kind of outcompete someone out of the market. And I think especially like on the smaller scale software side, it would be too big of an investment for an incumbent to actually like put in those resources at such a high risk of like, maybe I don't actually outcompete them. Maybe they outcompete me.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So back to marketing, because I think that to me is like maybe the most interesting topic because there's just so much nuance to it. And like, it's so out of my domain of understanding. And I feel like that is like really the core piece to building an app or a SaaS product. All right. So, yeah, what would you say are the steps in the thought process when you're thinking of like how to market a product or an app? Like what are your mental steps for that?
Yeah, great question. I'm a social media guy, right? And like, I think that's the easiest way to start marketing, right? Is like to get on TikTok or to get on Instagram Reels and just start making videos for free because it costs $0
Sure.
and you can test really, really rapidly that way, right? But I'm a big fan of kind of sitting back and like seeing what's happening on social media and like understanding what's going viral in your niche before you start posting, right? So like doing a lot of market research and kind of like favoriting those videos that go super viral within your niche, putting them into a spreadsheet and like analyzing those and then understanding like what type of content is going viral in your space and then start creating, right? And I think you'll have a much
Totally.
easier time being successful on social media if you do that first, right? Like if you go in with some sort of plan. And then it's just a matter of like committing and posting a lot and learning as you go and getting better, right? Like,
Yeah, that totally makes sense. This is going to make me, seem older, but I don't really use TikTok. I've pretty much mostly used like Instagram. Is there a way to do that on Instagram where you can assess how popular something is, or is that more of a TikTok thing?
I think it's easier on TikTok for sure because you can kind of filter it by like most liked videos of all time. But I'm sure like on Instagram, like you could probably type in a keyword and then it'll show you like the most, you can go to like, you can type in a keyword and then go to, Reels and
Yeah,
then search that way. Or I'm sure there's some sort of tool online that will show you like the most popular people.
that's a good point.
I've never done it on
Totally.
Instagram, to be honest. I think it's way easier on TikTok
Yeah.
and like that's where everyone should start. But I,
Yeah.
I would imagine it's the same.
So actually on that point, what are your thoughts on the new TikTok ban when it goes into play? Is that going to be pretty impactful?
I think the TikTok ban is all politics, bro. Like, I don't think it's, if you would ask me like my real opinion, I don't think it's going to go through. I think it's all just noise, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
100 million people that use TikTok in the United States. A lot of
Yeah.
people are employed at TikTok. I have a couple friends who are employed like in the LA headquarters of TikTok. Like, what are they going to do? Just completely wipe it off the face of the earth? I think
Yeah. There's no way.
I think that's hard to do. I think it maybe is too big to fail at this point,
Yeah.
right? And like, I think getting rid of an app like that, like, kind of violates some of the First Amendment rights. So, if you were to
Yeah.
ask me if it's gonna get banned, I don't think so. And even if it does, like, I still think there's other opportunities on other platforms like YouTube and Instagram and every other social media, right? So, like, whether it happens or
Yeah.
not, I think everyone will still win in the end.
Totally. So once you get to a video that has organic legs to it, where it's actually growing pretty fast, how do you then take that and make a campaign out of it?
Good question. Yeah, I think once you have a video that goes viral, like, you relentlessly make that video over and over and over again, like remake pretty much the same video until it stops going viral for you organically. Like, because
Yeah, that
TikTok
makes sense.
loves, and like a lot of the times if you see like the most popular people on TikTok, they do the same thing over and over again. You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
so I think you should squeeze the juice out of it like as much as you can organically and keep making the same content. But then, yes, to answer your question, like I think you can take your most pop, and this is like why I was successful with Puff Count. Like this is exactly how I scaled from like $3,000 a month to $30,000 a month with this mobile app. Was like I took my best performing TikToks, uploaded them to paid ads, and clicked run. Right? Like, and I'm not a paid
Yeah.
ads expert, but taking your best performing organic content and uploading it to paid ads is like the easiest win ever. Like you don't need to have
Yeah.
a brain to upload it to the paid ads dashboard and then click run. Like it's so easy.
Yeah. That actually makes so much sense because it's like you already have tested it. It already organically does work. You're just giving it a little extra boost on top of what it already has. Do you ever do that on any other platform? Like do you do that on YouTube at all?
I don't do it on, I haven't tried YouTube Shorts ads yet, but it works on Facebook. It works on Snapchat. Like uploading my same TikTok that has performed well works on like every platform. It's insane. So,
And do all of the platforms have equally good tools to assess how performant the ad is and how much you can target it and all that kind of stuff?
yeah, when it comes to like analytics and getting feedback on your ads, I think TikTok is the absolute worst for some reason, right?
Really?
Like, yeah, at least for mobile apps, right? And mobile apps are a little bit tricky because like with iOS 14, they made tracking like super tough. So you have to use like these mobile measurement partners. I use AppsFlyer, and TikTok like doesn't jive with AppsFlyer super well. It's like harder. But with Facebook and Snapchat, like I can see the data plain as day. Like here's how much I'm paying to acquire a subscriber. And then, you know, on the LTV side of things, like I understand how much a subscriber like makes me. And as long as that ratio is 1 to 3, like you're printing money, right? So,
Yeah,
but
totally.
yeah, I think the platforms make it very clear.
So then that tool basically feeds data from the ad platform into your app analytics system so that you can track how many people are coming from the ads,
Exactly.
essentially.
Exactly.
Oh, that's really cool. So then you can kind of target the ads more well to that particular group of people. Right?
100%. 100%. And you can target people who are most likely to download your app. You can target people who are more likely to start a free trial. And you can target people who are likely to subscribe and stay subscribed to your app. Like doing paid ads is super, super powerful.
So what resources did you use when you were trying to get the hang of that? Or did you just kind of trial by fire, figure it out as you go?
So I actually have a really good friend. His name is Mark. Call him Marco. His name is Mugo on Twitter, and he actually got me into like the paid ad side of things. He's like an e-commerce guru, paid ads guru, cold email guru, and he actually like introduced me and taught me all this stuff. So I have to thank him right off the bat. But I think it is really just messing around and getting in there and like, you know, having the money to like kind of burn on paid ads and, you know, testing things out, right? I think the paid ads platforms make it super easy for anyone to kind of do it at this point, right? Because like the AI targeting like will pretty much do it all for you, right? It is going to optimize for the lowest cost objective. Like whatever you choose is just going to optimize for the lowest cost objective. And I think it's much easier when you have a lot of creatives to test with, right? Like if you're only uploading 1 or 2 or 3 ads to your ads dashboard every single week, like you're going to fail. You need to be uploading like 20, 50, like test as much content as possible. And then the ad platform will optimize around it and make it super easy for you. Like, I don't think it takes an ads expert to be successful running paid ads anymore. I think it's just easy.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's kind of the same sort of idea behind a lot of these like small us type of people who try to make apps. You know, a lot of them will make 30, 40 apps before they even hit one that's successful or hit a few that are successful because really you're just kind of testing the market, right?
100%.
That's cool. So how does that whole system calculate? How do you assess customer lifetime value? Is that just part of that system that you're talking about?
Yeah, there's tools that will do it for you, right? Like Revenue Cat will tell you your LTV. There's a tool that I use called Chart Mogul, and essentially it's like your average revenue per user divided by your churn, I think is the formula. Correct me.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I flipped them around, but then you get to
Sounds
your
right.
LTV, right?
Okay.
you get to your LTV. So yeah, there's tools that do it for you. That's
so cool. I was not aware that was even a thing until I saw your videos. I'm like, that is the coolest way to like actually visually track how much value you're getting out of your money going into the ad space. It's so crazy. So, okay, on that topic, when you create an ad, how much money, like, you don't have to use real dollars, but like, I don't know, percentage wise of what you invest into the app or something like that, do you usually throw at ads and, assess that it's actually being successful before you throw more money into it?
I launch every ad set or like campaign at a minimum of $150 a day. And like
Okay.
you can start with less money, but the more money you throw into the ads, the faster you're just going to get data, and the faster you're going to know if it's working or not, right?
Sure.
So I don't really think it. I think it does matter. The more money that you throw into the campaigns, the more successful you're going to be faster, I think. But you could start with a smaller budget too, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. How many simultaneous apps do you usually develop and focus on at once, or do you just focus on one at a time?
Dude, I think it's hard to focus on many apps at the same time unless you have a really good team, right? Like I think it depends on
Yeah,
how big your team is. But if it's just yourself building them and like maybe one developer, I think it's hard to like have your focus everywhere. Like,
totally.
and I think that's kind of like a misconception, right? Is that like, well, maybe this does work for some people, but like I feel like a lot of people do try to just build 10 apps at the same time, and like if they don't see success in the first week, like they just move on to the next one, which maybe is a decent strategy. I think it's like a shotgun type approach. But
Sure.
if you look at my experience with like Puff Count, I launched the app and like no one cared about it for like 3 to 6 months when I initially launched it, right? Only when I started to
Sure.
blow up on TikTok and be successful on TikTok did I really start to catch traction. And I was like, oh shit, this is like a great. And then I shifted all my focus into it. And then, you know, all my focus was there, but that's how I was able to scale it, right? Because my focus and
Sure.
attention was there, and like I was working on the product. So I think it's important for people to not give up on their ideas too quickly, right? Like commit
Yeah.
to it for a little bit.
Yeah. On that note, how do you assess when it is time to throw in the towel with a particular product and if it's even worth pursuing at all? Because I feel like you could also do it too far the other way, where you could, put so much time and effort into something that just there's no market for it.
Yeah, no, it is a good question. And I don't know, to be honest, I don't really have the answer for you.
Yeah.
I think it's like a passion thing when it comes down to it, right? And like I don't know. That is a really good question. I think it definitely comes down to the person building the product and like knowing, right? Like is any of your marketing working, or like people interested? But like, I also think it comes back to the idea and kind of like what we spoke about a little bit earlier is like going into it with a marketing mindset. Like, are you going into a niche? Are you building a product that like people actually want and like from square one, right? And if that is the
Yeah.
case, then I truly believe like continuing to work on it and like improving the product will lead you to success. But like if you're building something completely new and like you haven't done any market research, you haven't validated like the market yet, then I think maybe you do give it a shorter lifetime before you kind of move on to the next thing, right? It's hard for me to
Yeah.
say
Totally.
concretely, but I think it just varies from idea to idea.
No, it's true. And so I just listened to this podcast about the founding of Nike. And it's really interesting because one of the things that happened there is the running shoe business was just tiny at that. Like when they first started it, there was like the total addressable market was like maybe $1 billion a year, which, that's big, but it's not huge. It's not like, nowadays I think it's like 400 or 500 trillion, or sorry, billion dollars. But they created that. They expanded the market. It wasn't that big until they got into it and made it like this identity thing where like people associated with the brand, which is kind of wild. Actually, on that topic of brand, like, do you try to build some sort of like brand identity around your products?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think like for the longevity of any product, like you do have to build a brand, and people kind of need to start associating your brand with whatever niche you're in, right? So I think that is
Sure.
important. And I mean, it really just depends on like kind of what your goal is. Like if you're focused on one thing and like you want to make this business like a home run, like 100% focus on brand, focus on building a new niche, focus on, getting people to understand this is like the Nike example, right? Like focus on getting people to want running shoes and like building that whole, market out. If that's kind of your goal. But if your goal is to make like a quick buck, like I think going into a market that's already established and like building a product that's slightly better than the others is like the easiest way to go about that. people have
Totally.
been
That makes sense.
successful doing that too. So it just depends on which way you want to go.
So I'm thinking about submitting an app to, or like an app idea I have to that 99 design site that you were suggesting in one of your videos. And I had a question on that. What do you think? Like, how does that process work? Do you get out like a full designed app, or do you like get kind of a starting point that you then talk directly with your designer that you chose out of the contest, and then start building out all the different views?
Yeah. I mean, you get like a blueprint, like, right. You can choose if you want one screen or like 6 screens, and like you obviously pay more for 6 screens, but you get essentially like a
Sure.
blueprint that any other designer can work from, right? Like they'll give you a Figma or Photoshop, and any other designer, like I've worked with like 3 or 4 designers on my app, right? But they're all able
Yeah.
to use that initial design that I got from 99 Designs to kind of build out the next
Oh,
screen.
that's so cool.
But
Totally.
yeah, definitely want to double tap on like 99 Designs for like people who maybe don't know what it is. But essentially, like, it is the fastest way to get a UI built for your app, right? Like, because you can start with a contest, right? So like essentially, like what I do is I sketch out my entire idea of what the app should look like. And then I upload those sketches to 99 Designs, and I will get 50, 60, 70, 80, sometimes designers who all submit their idea of exactly what my app in the UI should look like. And I get to choose the best one, and only the best one gets paid. And it is by far hands down the best way to get an app designed like out there in the market, right? Because you're only paying like 600, 800 bucks, but you're getting so many options that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And it's just like, it's a cheat code, right? So like starting from that point.
Yeah.
And then once you do kind of come to that winning design, like you can work with the same designer, right? Like you just be like, hey, I want to work with you like for a while on this. And then you can, take it off platform. 99 Designs doesn't really want you to do that, but like you can work with them one-on-one, and like they can continue to build out new screens as you request them. You know what I mean?
So yeah, that's such a good, that was like one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. Like I had no idea that platform existed until you said that on your YouTube video, and is like the best concept ever. Cause obviously you can find the best of like 80 people in that whole group at designing, and then potentially follow up with them. It's such a good idea. How'd you find that platform, by the way?
Dude, good question. I have no idea.
Just random.
I used 99 Designs since like 2015.
Okay.
I have,
Yeah, it's one of those ones that's like a mystery of like where it came from.
yeah, but I'm so glad I found it. I don't get designs done anywhere else. Like I don't build logos. I don't build UI. I don't go anywhere else except for 99 Designs. There's nowhere else to go, right? Like,
Yeah, that makes sense. How hard is it to find a good developer in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it takes trial and error. I think like hiring people in general is a skill that takes time to develop, and like you understand kind of like who's good and who's not over time, right? Like when I first started hiring developers on Upwork, I got scammed, bro. Like people would just take my money and, they hide behind fake profiles or whatever it may be. But like, as I've kind of gained experience, I think I've spent something like $20,000 on Upwork. I've hired over 100 people. I've been on the platform for years and years. As you kind of like develop that experience, like you understand right off the rip, like who's good, like right off their profile and like, their portfolio, right? Like you start to understand who's good. And I think like the one main hack to like hiring a freelancer on Upwork is you get on a 15-minute, 10-minute call with them before you sign anything or before you bring them on, right? And like you get a vibe of who they are as a person, right? And if they present well, if they present well and like, they're excited about your project and they have good ideas throughout you, then like more likely than not, they're probably a good developer, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I think like too, like through my experience, like the best place to hire from is Eastern Europe. Like they're the best developers at like 50% of the cost of the US. And just like, I think that's the best place to go.
Yeah, I kind of have gotten that vibe too. Like my company has hired people from kind of all over the world, just in different programming capacities. And yeah, Eastern Europeans seem to be pretty solid. It's kind of interesting that they must have like just a really good education system, or maybe work ethic or something. Like culturally, it seems like that sets them apart.
I think it's a culture thing, man. Like their code is clean. they're like on
Yeah.
point, you know, and like they always go the extra mile, right? Like I'll submit an idea and like they'll always be like, oh, I think you should do this way, it'll be better. Or like, hey, I by the way, I added this because I think it'll improve the feature set or whatever it may be. But and like if I hire someone from somewhere else, like the United States, for example, like they're a bit lazy, right? And like they do the bare minimum
Yeah.
to scrape by. So it's just like I think it's a cultural
Totally.
thing.
Yeah, no, that actually does make sense. How much do you get into the nitty gritty of like, do you actually look at the code and like, I don't know, do you like mess around with it at all? And like for the especially for the people who are not super technical, like how much tech savvy do you actually need to have to be fairly successful at like assessing all of this?
I don't. And I really don't. But like I have people that I trust, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that's
throughout
huge.
my time hiring people on Upwork, like I trust my guys 100%. And like, I don't really need to hire new developers off Upwork anymore because I have my go-to guy. Like I have my go-to developer, I have my go-to designer, I have my go-to
That's
paid
awesome.
ads guy. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
yeah, I think
totally.
for someone who's like initially approaching working with a developer, like again, take your time to vet these people, like take your time to hop on a call and like chat with them for 10 to 15 minutes. And then if you're
Totally.
scared of them taking, like, this is the number one thing I get all the time. Like, I'm scared of the developer or the designer taking my idea. First of all, if you're scared of it, have them sign an NDA. Like, there's templates on the internet. It's
Yeah.
like takes 20 seconds. But again, like, I've never had a problem with people stealing my ideas. Like, I think it's more about the execution. It's not about the idea. You know what I mean? But yeah, just like, you know,
But you wouldn't post like your app idea on the initial posting, right? Like that would
no,
be for like a follow up. Yeah.
exactly. Like you could say, hey, I want
Yeah.
an app built in the fitness space and it needs to be in iOS and Android, like apply. And then once they apply, then you can get on a call with them, share details once you trust them or once you have them sign an NDA, whatever it is. So like, I wouldn't be afraid of that. And like a lot of these people on Upwork, I know it's scary to like hire someone on the internet and like work with them, but like they're all great people. Like I've made
Yeah.
lifelong friends hiring people off Upwork. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like I would encourage people to be kind of more optimistic about hiring online. Like I think it's a great tool that not a lot of people really leverage. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean like do your research and obviously like make sure that they're doing their work, set, you know, milestones for them, if you will. And at the end of the day, like, bro, I don't pay the developer a single cent until the app is uploaded on the store. It works. There's no bugs. I've tested it. My homies have tested it. They don't get paid until the product is live and it works, right? And like that's how
Yeah.
I set up everything.
So there's like enough people that actually are willing to do that, like
Yeah.
program an
Well,
app without an hourly pay.
yeah, I mean, like, and you're both getting what you want out of it, right? Like the developer wants to get paid and you want the app
Totally.
done. So like the money
Yeah.
goes into escrow. The money goes into escrow on Upwork. So the money is held by Upwork.
Right.
So if
Right.
so let's say the developer does their job perfectly, they launch the app and I'm like getting greedy and I just want to run and take the app and not pay them. Upwork makes the call, right? Like the freelancer can say, "Hey, Upwork,
Gotcha.
I submitted the code. Here's the app." They submit everything to Upwork. Upwork reviews everything, and then Upwork can make the decision to pay the developer, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I think it is the best place to go, right? Like, they'll protect
Yeah.
both sides, right? And I think that's kind of why
Yeah.
it's,
That makes sense.
that's why it's important to like stay on
It's
platform too. If you,
right. And it's kind of it's agreed upon ahead of time. Like this is the contract that we both agree to. So it's not like anyone's being
exactly,
blindsided by anything. Right.
exactly,
No, that
right?
makes sense.
And you
Yeah.
just like I
No.
think, like you said, you make it very apparent up front. Like, hey, I'm not paying until the
Yeah.
app is live on the store. There's no bugs and yada yada
Yeah.
yada. And like,
I love that. I think that's super cool. And it makes sense. Like if you're a good developer and you're confident in your skill set, that shouldn't be a problem. And you would know most developers, it's hard to time estimate, but you can still like, especially if you've done a lot of work, you can definitely assess like this project there's no way I'm going to be able to do this in 3 weeks or, 3 months or whatever the amount is.
100%,
So that makes sense.
100%.
How do you come up with app names?
Oh, dude, this is another great question. I really have no idea.
Just comes to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I've been playing around with. Do you ever mess around with ChatGPT?
Yes. I think you're absolutely right. Like any new company that I built recently, like I've used ChatGPT like to come up with the name. So yes.
It is pretty cool. Like you can just be like, this is my general idea and give me 30 ideas for a name, and then you can tweak it off of that. It's kind of a cool starting point.
I think I will say like just the one note on like coming up with an app name, like app store optimization is crucial. And I think your app name has a lot to do with kind of like where your app ranks in the app store for certain keywords. So that's one thing I would keep in mind. Like you definitely want to include some high traffic keywords in your app name just to help your ASO out.
That's a really good point. I never actually thought of that. That's cool.
And that's a mistake that I made calling my app Puff Count, because like it doesn't really like no one's that's not a term that people search. You know what I mean? So like I kind of shot myself in the foot there. But you can always change your app name too. So
true. Though now that you've put some money into marketing, it probably wouldn't make sense with that one.
Yeah, and you can like there's things you can do like right like I could call my app Puff Count, quit vaping app. Right. And it could be like a super long tail like name, but I don't want to do that. I like the way it looks clean. Right. And like, I don't really rely on ASO too much for my downloads. So it's not really bothering me that much.
That makes sense. Okay. On the note of like paid apps, how do you come up with the price point that makes sense that you feel like, or I mean, I know you do like A/B testing, but like, how do you even get the right A/B elements, price ranges to even start with?
So there's different ways to go about it, right? Like you can get pricing ideas for your app, doing market research and looking at what other apps are pricing themselves for on the App Store, right? Or like, and this is kind of what I encourage everyone to do, is you just relentlessly A/B test like literally everything. And the way you A/B test is you start on very opposite ends of the scale, right? Like you're going to test $1 versus like $99, right? And everything in between. And like, what's great about like this tool called Superwall is you can literally A/B test everything on your paywall. You can test all the different pricing and it will tell you which one is the most optimal based on kind of like every user's lifetime value, right? So I would encourage people to test again a lot and do on the small side and do on the super like expensive side. And Superwall will tell you exactly like where in the middle the best pricing strategy is. So that's what I would say.
Amazing.
I'd say do market research to get a rough idea and then use Superwall to really dial in the exact pricing.
So with something like Puff Count, what was your kind of closest corollary app that you could assess?
Yeah, there's a bunch of apps out there kind of in like the sobriety space. Like there's a quit drinking app and there's I've been sober for X amount of time app. And then there's a lot of quit smoking cigarette apps. So I looked at a lot of those and kind of what they were doing for pricing. Those gave me a lot of inspiration, but also, man, like there's a lot of like TikTok apps that use really aggressive pricing strategies. So I think it's like taking a page out of everyone's book and kind of seeing what works for everyone,
Totally. And how long does that process take when you're doing the A/B testing to kind of for all the data to filter in to the point where you actually get some sort of conclusive results?
So it's tough, right? Because like a lot of app developers want to optimize for like a year-long subscription, right? So like, let's say you're testing a year-long subscription versus a monthly subscription versus a weekly subscription. You have to test them all for a year and understand the lifetime value of each one of those to understand kind of which one is the most optimal, right? So like it does take a bit of time. And the longer out you go, like if you want to do like a yearly price point, like you do have to test all these things for a year. But again, I think it just comes down to figuring out what your LTV is, getting enough traffic in, getting enough volume to each one of your kind of price points to understand like, hey, this is the LTV. It's not going to fluctuate that much from where it's at right now. Like my app has been downloaded 700,000 times. So I'm fairly certain that my LTV isn't going to fluctuate that much. I've just got so much data in that I know exactly where my price point is and like how much each user is going to make me. Right. So it takes time and it takes, I think it doesn't take time. It takes volume of people like using your app and buying your products. Right.
Where would you say in terms of like number of users did you kind of make that final choice where you're like, oh yeah, this is the paywall I'm going to go with?
Dude, not soon enough. Like for the longest time, I was not charging a lot. Like I think for like the first 2 years of the app, I was not charging a lot. And then, I started charging more and I just drastically saw my revenue increase. So I think like the key is to always charge more and don't be afraid to test early on. Like I didn't do any testing and that's on me. I lost out on so much money by not testing early though.
A lot of people got some sweet value from your app for not a lot of money. That's nice. Let's see. Oh yeah, how do you do legal work? Like when you get your privacy policy and that sort of stuff, how do you set that all up?
There's a generator online.
Sweet.
So you just like, there's like a privacy policy and terms of service generator for iOS or for mobile apps in general.
Okay.
And they make it super easy for you. You just fill in the blanks. They ask you, actually, what's the name of your company? Do you want to have these sort of restrictions, whatever it may be? Are you going to market in the EU? Like they ask you all these questions and then they'll generate the entire thing for you and you just throw it up there. But
Gosh, that's so cool. The internet is a crazy place these days. What do you do for customer support? Is it like, do you ever have customer issues that like, I don't know, do you have to like
yeah,
email
so
people on the fly and stuff?
I do. I have a support email that gets monitored. I like check it every now and then. Some people, but like a lot of the customer support actually happens through like social media. You know what I mean? Like a lot of my early customer support inquiries were on my TikTok, like in the comments, and I was going back and forth with people and like fixing bugs that way. But yeah, I think like social media, email is how it's handled, but it's not too intense. Like Apple does handle a lot of the, if someone wants a refund or they want to cancel or whatever, it's all done through Apple. So like Apple makes it super easy for developers and take a lot off their plate.
That is really nice. That is really nice. Yeah. So my next area of inquiry is regarding acquiring other people's apps. Have you ever done that? And what is the process like for that?
So I have not personally acquired someone else's app, but I have bought skins that I work from, which is, I think, one of the easiest ways to kind of get started, especially if you have a lower budget. Starting off with kind of an app template is a really good place to start, right? Because you don't have to start from scratch, which saves you a boatload of money. But yeah, I think it's a good place to start. I've had an app acquired from me, which is a great experience.
Pretty cool. Yeah, that's super cool. Where do you list that?
So there are a bunch of cool marketplaces, like there's Flippa and there's Acquire, where you can list any sort of business, whether it be mobile app or whatever, and you can kind of list it there, and people are always browsing those looking for companies to buy. So I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And do you normally, or in that case, when you did do that, did you have that potential client or buyer sign an NDA before you went into contract, or like before you potentially talked to them about
Yeah,
that?
I think like with any kind of like acquisition, it definitely gets very it's very touchy, and you definitely want to sign like a LOI, a letter of intent, and an NDA, obviously, because they're gonna have to do their due diligence, and they look at your entire business, they look at your financials, they dig into literally everything from the code to your social media. So yeah, I think it's important to like get something in place where they can't obviously share that information. And you want to make sure you have an LOI in place, and like they're actually a serious buyer and they're not just like trying to get information from you, right? So yeah, definitely
totally. Does it become kind of, is there any risk of like someone from another country that doesn't have the same legal system? Do you know of that being an issue?
I don't know personally. I don't know. I'm not the most educated when it comes to law, but I don't know, dude. You'd have to like,
Google, no. These are
Google is
these are like my high level questions. I'm like, you like may as well ask everything and see what works.
I think Google is your friend, and like getting legal advice is crucial too. Like I don't think anyone should be doing an acquisition without a legal advisor right by their side, kind of making sure that everything is all good. So yeah, I mean, and again, you can like hire a lawyer on Upwork.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. I didn't realize you could do legal counsel on there. So, okay, if you were to restart your whole business today, what would your advice to yourself be? Like, what would you do? What would be your steps?
Dude, if I was to start today building mobile apps,
or whatever you think would be the most bang for your buck or bang for your time or whatever, like whatever you would.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think entrepreneurship comes in like stages, right? And I think, at the first stage, you have to acquire skills, right? Like if you don't have any skills, if you don't have any high high leverage, high value skills. Like you need to acquire those. For me, it was first building websites and then was becoming like a good marketer. So I built those skills and didn't really make much money, but like I learned a ton and built up my skill set. And then, I used that skill set to sell out my time to other people. I started an agency and started making, social media content for other people. And then, I got decent cash flow. And then I took it to the next level and started hiring people. So I hired people to run the agency operations for me, right? And then after that, I had money to invest in like software and invest in apps. And then, then it takes even less of your time, right? And you can really kind of step away and like build real value for a company that way. So I think it does come in stages, right? And obviously I was all over the place. Like I started building apps when I was a little bit younger and like kind of was all over the place. But I think generally, like if I was starting now, that's kind of the place that's where I would start. I would build my skill set, sell those skills, rent out my time, start renting out other people's time, and then build software to really like scale and build enterprise value. I think that's the blueprint right now.
What would you say the biggest takeaway you had from learning how to build websites was, and what value that provided for your current life?
I think a lot of it came down to like problem solving and understanding the leverage that like code and software has. You know what I mean? Because like I realized at a very young age that like with social media and a website, a piece of software like a website, like there's no limit to how many people can visit your product or like buy from a website, right? Or like visit an ad. So I think really
Totally.
early on, like I realized like kind of like the potential scale that software had. And then once you figure that out, once you make your first dollar online, like with a digital product, like there's no turning back, bro. Like it's just like, it becomes the easiest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you avoid getting into, I don't know, like physical product sales and e-commerce and all that? Not that that's like a bad thing by any means, but it's just definitely
so
more
I didn't
work.
avoid it. I was a dropshipper once upon a time. I was selling hoverboards and they were actually doing,
No way.
was like, we were like one of the first, me and my buddy from high school, we started dropshipping hoverboards. I watched like a Casey Neistat video, and Casey Neistat like kind of exposed hoverboards and showed everyone where to buy them for super cheap on AliExpress. And I just started doing that and reselling them and like kind of fell into like drop shipping pretty naturally. But dude, I got so screwed over. Like the manufacturers started like to not produce the boards fast enough. And then the shipping time took forever. So like, I started getting a ton of chargebacks and refunds. So I actually like lost money on the dropshipping business. And I was like, all right, well, this sucks. So like now I'm going to look to like mobile apps. Yeah. And then dude, it was just so much, it's such an easy, it's a much more like scalable business model, right? Like technology and.
Yeah, totally. Because with physical products, you have to deal with like inventory and like you were saying, people, returning stuff and all that. That's just a nightmare to deal with, especially at a smaller
And again,
scale.
the technical moat, man, like the competition started coming into the market and like everyone started selling hoverboards because they were the hot new product. Yeah. So like you have no, again, unless, you're building a real product that has a brand like a Nike or like a Gucci or like a Goyard, unless you have that like brand value, bro, it's just a matter of time before people come into the market, they start undercutting you, and then it's a race to the bottom. Like, I think that's the main problem. Whereas like with software, with mobile apps, you have that technical moat, you have your technology that is yours, and no one can take that from you.
Yeah, I so agree with that. Because even looking at like more day-to-day businesses, even like, restaurants and things like that. I love those businesses. I love that they exist, but man, that is such a hard business to be in because you're just competing against every single other, restaurant or whatever, food service business or coffee shop in that space. And there's just no moat there. It's crazy.
And like, I think mobile apps are cool too, bro. Cause like, again, you have the technical moat, but like at the same time, like once you build your app and like it's on the store, it's there for like, you don't really have to do many updates to it. Apple drives me a ton of like organic downloads. So you're always making at least a little bit of money, like on autopilot. And like once your product is launched, it's just a matter of sending more people to it and marketing it. So I think it's a very attractive business model to be in.
It is. It truly is. What lessons have you started learning in the B2B space with what you're currently working on?
Good question. I'm still working on the product. I need to get it out there. But I think running my agency taught me a lot about like B2B and like the sales process and stuff like that. And I think like at the end of the day, it is a little bit more complicated, right? Like because solving problems for businesses is naturally just going to be harder than solving a problem for like someone who wants to quit vaping, right? Like, or like any random consumer.
Totally.
So I think you do have to approach it a little bit smarter. You do have to solve bigger problems, which is going to take more upfront capital when you're building a piece of software to solve those problems. And I think, the marketing and sales process is just vastly different. Like I can't necessarily go on TikTok and sell a B2B SaaS. Like I just don't think that'll really be super effective because, like social media marketing is more of like a mass approach, right? So like the marketing and the sales flow is just a completely different ball game, right? You have to learn how to like do cold calling and cold emailing and sales calls and like run targeted paid ads. And like, I think it's very different, but I think it's more attractive. And like, because it's harder, like naturally the value is higher in building one of those businesses. Like, I think you look at like the most popular or the most successful businesses out there right now, like there's B2B software businesses, you know what I mean? Like AWS
Absolutely.
or like whatever it may be. So, it's,
that AWS is actually it's a bigger business than Amazon proper now. Like they are literally the core of Amazon now.
I'm not shocked, right? Like I'm not shocked at all. And like,
no, they control,
you look at like,
they control like the whole internet.
So I don't know. It's a space that I'm fairly new at, like the B2B SaaS space. But as I learn more, I'd love to keep you updated.
Awesome. What do you, with your B2B SaaS, have you like, do you reach out to businesses in the space that you're trying to build something for to see if that's, I don't know, if the product has market value and if there are features and things that like could make it better for the potential buyers in that space?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way I got this idea for my B2B SaaS is like I am building it out of necessity for myself because I want this as a business owner. Like I want a product like this, but also like through running my agency and running into problems like with scale and like my customers, some of like the customers wanting more. I just like, again, like I recognize this problem in my own day-to-day life and like with my experiences that I had in the past and like I'm building a software to solve that. So like this isn't just some random idea that I think people might want. I know people want this. And that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
I think that, that's kind of the core of some of the best products ever is like, if it's a product that solves a problem you have and, you're like in some way a common person, that there's going to be like weight to that solution. Like, and you're going to have more passion in pursuing the right solution rather than just, it's just some product 100%. To make some money. Yeah, that makes sense. What do you do in terms of like managing the finances of your business? Do you like outsource accounting and stuff like that? Or is that still something you kind of do yourself?
It's a good question. And it's still something I do myself. But I'm definitely not the best at it. I'm very much a guy who's like, let's go all in and like, let's like I get super excited about new ideas. Right. And like, I just kind of want to like, just go for it regardless of the, of what it costs. So, sometimes that goes in my favor and sometimes it doesn't, but it's just me right now. But I like would recommend to get, again, like some sort of financial advisor.
Yeah. I think, some of the best entrepreneurs are the ones that take big risks. And obviously it has to be a calculated risk. You can't just like be crazy, but like, that's how you get the returns is you actually like have to make the risk.
Absolutely. And I think it's scary, but I think the payoff is much better in the end. You know what I mean? Like, I think risks are what got me here, like being able to travel and kind of like do my own thing. So pros and cons.
Yeah, totally. Okay. In closing, what advice would you give yourself, like, 18-year-old you that you wish you had back then?
Good question. What advice would I give my 18-year-old self? I would say like keep going. You know what I mean? Like stay passionate because I know when I was younger, when I was 18, I was like super passionate about like building apps and like coding and all that stuff. And I was, staying up after school and like learning all of it from YouTube and, just digesting as much as I could and like trial and error and like building stuff in my free time. And so I would say like do more of that and do it faster and like don't be afraid to fail and just keep going, because at the end of the day, like those skills build on top of each other, right? Like skills do build. The marketing stuff that I learned when I was 16 years old doing Twitter still like serves me to this day. And all the development stuff, like the website development stuff that I learned when I was 18 still serves me to this day, right? So I would say like build your skills when you're a young guy, learn as much as you can, whether it be from YouTube or like a mentor or even like a course, you know what I mean? Like invest in knowledge in the beginning. And then once you do have those skills, leverage them to build software or to work for someone else and offer them a service, right? So that's what.
Totally. And what would your advice be for like the point at which you should jump into the vast ocean of entrepreneurship, or like, take the first risk? Like, how did you kind of feel like, I don't know, not that you have to like feel like you're ready, but like, how would you think about that? Like, when is the right point?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think as an entrepreneur, like I think someone who wants to be an entrepreneur should always like be recognizing ideas and like writing down business ideas like as they go throughout their day-to-day life, right? Like when I was super young, I got like this tip to like start writing down all the problems I experienced throughout the day, right? And I started doing that in the notes app on my phone. And then if there's an idea that you cannot go to sleep or wake up without thinking about, like I think you should pursue that idea. And pursuing that idea doesn't necessarily mean that you have to drop out of college or quit your job or whatever it may be. You can do it after your 9 to 5. You can work on your business from 5 to 9, right? And then once you start to get like that safety net, once it starts to generate a little bit of revenue, that's when you can really go all in and like quit your job or like whatever it may be. Like once you're confident that the idea is going to work, right? So I think you take it in steps and like, it comes from a place of passion, right? Because being an entrepreneur, like you end up working, I think, more than you would at a traditional job, right? But you got to love it.
Totally. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I mean, it's like, if you're doing something that you actually find personal value in, it's not a job at the end of the day, because it's like something that you would have done even if you weren't getting paid for it to some degree, right?
So you enjoy it, and then it's fun, doesn't feel like work, and then you're good.
Yeah, that's amazing. Man, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me the time to, ask you a million questions. I feel like I learned a lot. And I just thank you for making your YouTube channel. I think it's really valuable, and I encourage you to keep
Thank you,
on
man.
Doing that.
Pleasure to be here, and absolute honor to be your first video. This is your first video podcast, yeah?
Yep, my first one. It will be. I hope I kick off a new era with Rogue Creators Podcast in 100%. Video form.
Well, again, thank you so much for the time. I'm super honored to be on your pod, and bro, we should do this again in some time here and catch up.
Please.